good to start. Hi, everyone. My name is Paloma Rago. I'm a faculty at the School of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton University. I teach in the Masters of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership. And as well, I'm the director of a new 5-year initiative called the Charity Insights Canada Project, in French, le Projet Canada, Perspective des organismes de bienfaisance, in which we create weekly data for the sector. I am pleased to welcome you for this event, PhilanthroTHINK. First, I would like to acknowledge that the Carleton University is on the unceded land of the Algonquin people, and I do hope that all the knowledge we produce contributes to a productive and a peaceful reconciliation with the peoples across Canada. I am pleased today that you are all coming with us to talk about this new thing coming that everyone seems to be talking about, and these implications for the sector, artificial intelligence. I am honored to welcome two colleagues, esteemed colleagues, who have a lot to say about the subject. First, my colleague here, Narinder Dhami, who is the executive lead and co-founder of New Power Labs, which leads research to uncover and share tools and best practices transforming how equity, diversity, and inclusions are applied by practitioners. She's also the president of the Sonor Foundation, a private family foundation. Dhami is a leading expert in the social finance domain. She designed and scaled 2 social ventures as a managing director. She made LEAP, the center, the Pecaut Centre for Social Impact, an innovator in venture philanthropy. And as the founding executive director of Rise Asset Development, she designed and scaled a Rotman CAMH financial initiative to provide an entrepreneurial path to employment for those with history of mental health and addiction challenges. And she will be talking to us about her new organization and the promises and the applications for the sector. Dr. Adegboyega Ojo is professor at the School of Public Policy and Administration and Canada Research Chair in Governance and Artificial Intelligence. He studies how digital and data technology can be used to support innovation in government institutions and address societal changes. He is interested in understanding the conditions and technical designs requirements for the beneficial and ethical use of data-driven innovation, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence-based solution in different public service and policy contexts. So after introducing my 2 esteemed colleagues, I just want to tell you a bit about the format today. And we hope that we have a very lively discussion and an open discussion about related to artificial intelligence. So the idea first today is to ask Dr. Ojo to tell us about artificial intelligence and give us some brief background, what it is, where it came from. And so he will talk about for 5-7 minutes. After, I will myself talk about where we could go, some of the challenges, limitation, and some of the ethical debates around the use of artificial intelligence, particularly for the nonprofit sector. Narinder Dhami will after talk about the implications directly for practitioner, the agenda also that we need to be crafting, and the needs the sector has and must address while tackling these new challenges. So then after, we'll have about 30 minutes open and reactions from the audience. So we're really looking forward to hear from you. And I will ask you to use the question box to ask any questions you have, and we'll use them and try to answer them in the order we receive. So I will ask my colleague, Dr. Ojo, to start us off. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. So thank you very much. So I'll be starting off by just giving a very broad background, which I call a bird's eye view of what AI is all about. So AI is seen currently as a general purpose technology and with the potential to address some of our biggest development challenges. And it's we're seeing also an accelerating adoption of the technology along with technologies such as cloud computing, big data, robotics, generally for the transformation of the different sectors and industries that we have. One of the greatest area of impact that we envisage for AI, and we are actually seeing that coming through, is in the area of productivity. So, for example, in the public sector, there is some projections that we could save, as much as between 1.2 billion hours to 41.1 billion hours in terms of productivity, depending on the level of investment that we make in the technology. I mean, of course, these estimates are usually very different depending on which organization is actually providing them. But I think the big takeaway is that we hope to see very dramatic improvement in terms of productivity. Particularly when we look at AI specifically in the context of the SDGs, which is really linked to the societal challenges that I spoke about earlier on, there are a number of pilot projects and concrete initiatives that are actually happening within, say, for example, particularly within the UN system. In a particular report that was released by the UN, we see projects, about 228 projects that are run by more than about 40 UN agencies across the various SDGs. And there's very good, there's evidence that AI is actually, already delivering impact in the area across the 17 SDGs, but particularly in the area of health and well-being, industry innovation, SDG 9, reducing inequalities, responsible consumption, 13, and the partnership for goals, which is SDG 17. When we look at the engagement of civil society organizations, SDG 1, which has to do with poverty, SDG 5, which has to do with gender, SDG 6, clean water, SDG 7, affordable and clean energy, 11, sustainable cities, 12, responsible consumption, 16 and 17, which has to do with peace, justice, and partnership, are all areas where we see very strong involvement of civil society organizations. So that's providing some background to, I think, what my other colleagues would, and discuss and later. But the economic impact and these benefits will not be even across the different parts of the world. And that's because the different parts of the world, will have, different level of readiness, right? So, and there are specific, I would say, factors that will determine the level of economic impact that we see in the various parts of the world. However, the estimate is that we're going to see between 5.4% and 26.1% of an increase in GDP, across the various areas. Okay, so but what do we really mean by AI? So we talked about it briefly, and there are many, descriptions and perceptions of AI that we generally, see across, both in academia, practice or policy. I will provide a more academic definition here because I'm sure my other colleagues will provide more practitioner-oriented and policy, related definitions or description of the technology. So here I would we'll start with the first definition, which is really one of the oldest definitions of AI, which is really as early as 1962, and which describes AI as constructing machines, that can exhibit behaviors that if we were to observe those behaviors in humans, we will label them as intelligent. The second definition is actually much more, I would say clearer, because it actually identifies the core capabilities that we usually relate, with AI, and that's provided by Russell and Novick, one of the two leading, researchers, AI researchers and academics in the world today. And they identified 6, core capabilities that AI systems would typically have. And the first has to do with natural language processing, which usually, for communication, knowledge representation, which is the means to actually store what knowledge the AI system has acquired, automated reasoning to be able to answer a question and draw a conclusion. I think Paloma is going to be speaking, about some of those things, and later. And machine learning, a capability to be able to, learn and adapt to new circumstances, detect patterns, and even extrapolate these patterns, for predictive purposes. Computer vision to be able to perceive the world, and robotics to be able to manipulate objects and move around. So these are the core technologies and capabilities that would usually be related, to AI. AI, in the AI ecosystem, there are a number of stakeholders and they have different roles. So we have policymakers, we have and that will be really involved in developing legal framework, making sure that the data that's required for the AI system is actually available, and that strategic investment is required to develop the AI capabilities and the industry is actually available. The academia, will provide research and exchange of ideas, industry to actually develop technology, civil society for accountability and inclusion, and of course, the international community for best practices and platforms for discussion of some of the key issues, and in the domain. While AI has a lot of promises and potentials, and we've actually started feeling them, there are a number of ethical challenges that AI actually also brings, and in response to this, there are a number of ethical frameworks and governance frameworks that have been developed over the past few years, and a synthesis of a number of these ethical guidelines, and actually more than 84 of them, are currently available, shows that AI systems are expected, to be, transparent. They're expected to maintain fairness, prevent, monitor, and mitigate bias. They are expected to ensure safety and security, as well as preventing harm to end users. And that AI systems are also expected to have upfront the attribution of responsibilities and legal liabilities. And we also expect the AI system to uphold and protect privacy of end users. To make those things, happen, there are a number of AI policy frameworks have been developed, by the various governments, and there are many of them. Canada is actually one of the first. It's the first country to actually develop a national strategy in 2017. But when you look across the various frameworks, there are a number of common things that you see there. You see, the need to develop talents and workforce. You see the need for industrialization of AI technologies. Promoting AI use in government, promoting developing data and digital infrastructure, a foreign policy aspect of AI regulations to address some of these ethical challenges, ensuring inclusion, and of course also upfront defining the ethical requirements that AI systems are actually meant to address. What's the state of play? The state of play for AI is actually measured by, one way to look at that is to look at the so-called AI Readiness Index. And an AI Readiness Index is actually provided, by, a group in Oxford, which is part of the Oxford Insights, initiative. And the initiative actually, that Readiness Index ranks countries based on the availability of government vision, regulations for responsibility of AI, the degree to which those the various governments have actually developed mature technology sector, and the requisite innovation capacity and skills to use AI, and thirdly, the availability of data on compute infrastructure, for AI. And this is the latest report, and you can see US is leading, Singapore, UK, Finland, and Canada in the fifth position. So I'll conclude by saying that, to really make, and to develop, AI, as seen in the quote by Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the UN, what is very important is to promote partnership, which will involve, government, society organization, academia, industry, and other groups, international organizations, of course, to work together, to ensure that the benefits of AI can actually be harnessed and to address the key challenges that we all care about, and of course, effectively addressing the risk that also comes with using, AI. And that's my bit for now. Paloma, I could.
Thank you so much. It's interesting, and I guess it links well to the to what I wanted to start talking about. I'm not sure if we can stop sharing that.
Yes, we can.
I'll start sharing mine. And so where I'm coming from here, I think you can start seeing is really this idea of artificial intelligence and the charitable sector. So when we discussed about the need to make such a meeting today, it was to really understand what it is, what it can bring, and some of the challenges, because it was a conversation that really took academia by surprise. Early December, when ChatGPT was released in November. So what are the possibilities? When we start thinking about artificial intelligence for the nonprofit sector, there are really good things that could be associated with. And we'll talk about some of the ethical dilemmas related to afterwards. One of the things is, and where we can apply this, is really related to, for example, languages. We're talking about translations, adapting and reaching out to marginalized communities, talking about learning and training, materials, idea generation, management. There are many artificial intelligence assisted software that optimize when it's best to schedule which volunteer, depending on very complex ideas and factors. But I was interested in understanding, and I think we are interested in understanding, this idea of readiness and how the sector is prepared or not. And so this week, for those who know the Charity Insight Canada project, we decided to ask directly a practitioner what they thought about data, artificial intelligence. So let me share with you here. I'm just gonna move this here. Apologize for them. I'm dealing with many screens here. Can you see my PDF? No, not yet. Okay, here. So this week in our survey, we asked about artificial intelligence. So for those who are unfamiliar with the Charity Insights Canada project, every week we send a survey to a panel of about 1,000 charities across the countries, registered charities, and our panelists answer. We have about a response rate that averages around 68%. So it's a really high response rate. And these organizations come from all different types of charities. Some are foundations, some are across sectors of activity. So this week we thought, we're talking about artificial intelligence. Let's ask the sector how they are. So the first question we asked was to rate on a scale from 1 to 7, how prepared they felt using artificial intelligence to support the work of their organization. And as you can see, a vast majority in the sector feel strongly unprepared to use AI in their work. And so this really tells us as educator as well at Carleton that we need to do a lot of work to inform the possibility and what it can do. When we asked, and there's a lot of skeptics as well, when we ask if artificial intelligence would fundamentally change how the sector operates, a lot of people were neutral, and we can interpret that either they have no opinion or they're not sure. And very few actually thought this would be an immense change. And this makes me think of a personal anecdote. In 2000s, I was visiting Seattle. I met someone who told me this bizarre story of them working in a warehouse for a company called Amazon, where people would order things online. And I thought in 2000, how bizarre, and who would ever do that? So I think we are facing one of these big shifts, and we should be paying attention. But apparently, very few agree that this will fundamentally change. Many thought that AI was not necessarily directly related to the work of the organization. And I'll show you an example of how we can use it really concretely. And I think that's the part that has been really hard for practitioners in the sector, is to operationalize. How does it look in practice using AI, or at least the tools we have now available? And they're coming out so fast that it's kind of hard to catch up. We have the entire report posted on our website. So if you go on carleton.ca/CICP-PCPub, you will find all our reports there. So you'll have more. And so I don't want to go through all the information. We can discuss this during. But when we asked them if the panelists thought that AI could help charitable organization to target more efficiently and more effectively their program and services, people somewhat agreed, but most of the people, again, are neutral. And this really tells me that there's a lack of information, and maybe the charitable sector needs to be more ready about what's coming. Most of the people disagree that AI will reduce the need for human intervention in decision-making in the charitable sector. Perhaps it's this notion of risk that some people find these technologies risky. So we ask later on whether or not, here, let me find, whether or not people thought that these technology could help or could contribute to perpetuate bias, discrimination. And most of the people are actually neutral or slightly agreeing with the fact that this tool has a lot of risks embedded in it. Because as we know, and if we think about it, however these algorithms are trained, they're trained on data information that has been produced and produces information based on that. So if the information we have is not curated or has some bias in them, what we're going to generate will perpetrate some of these bias. At least that's the argument behind it. People strongly agree that AI could result in the loss of personal connection between organizations. And so that's really something that people are thinking a lot about. And this is really one of the most starking kind of worries around the AI. And finally, and I'll continue with the presentation. I just wanted to give you an idea of some of the data. There is a worry that this could lead to job loss. Some people have expressed the same worry in academia, saying, what's our added value if an AI algorithm can produce content and knowledge? So there is a lot here to learn and talk about. So let me just finish here the presentation because I don't want to, I know that I have limited time. Let me just finish here. So I wanted to show you, because we keep talking about examples of what AI can do. So I literally went on ChatGPT, which is what everyone's been talking about recently, to show you what it looks like. So let me put this a bit bigger so we can see how this works. So what I did is I asked ChatGPT to show me, and I'm not sure if someone can tell me if you actually see the screen properly, but okay, I asked ChatGPT a question and let's see what the answer was. So I asked ChatGPT, could you could you create a post, one social media post in English, in French, and in indigenous language, using the right hashtags about AI and the housing crisis in Canada. So within about a minute, it had created the 3 translations for me. Then after I said, okay, use this information and draft an email for me that will help me raise funds around this issue. And so it was able, as you saw, to draft this really quickly. So it's not that quick. I sped up a bit the speed here, but let's say I just sped up twice. But this is just to give you an idea of some of the potential that could be used. So I would invite people to go and try to interact with this mysterious chatbot, because I do think that at some point this will really help us find interesting and new venues. And I'll conclude quickly, because I know I'm probably talking too long. I get very excited about these topic, is the issue of ethics around this. So as we're talking about AI, there is a large vocabulary, there's a large aspect, a technical aspect that comes with artificial intelligence. And we have been talking since early 2000s about the creation of this global divide and digital divide between those who have access to recent technologies, even computing, which is still an issue for many organizations. And now we're witnessing the acceleration of the development of new tools. And this has a serious potential of increasing this divide. So we're talking about access, utilization, and this technical aspect of that few come and really deeply understand these tools. So you're kind of at the mercy of the people who do embrace and understand these tools. And so I hope this is kind of a warning shot for organization in the charitable sector and those working with organizations to think about supporting some initiatives as well. The other part is misinformation, and I've alluded to that, is that the information we produce, so AI and ChatGPT, for example, produces content. So the information we produce is actually directly related to the information we have. So if we're not critical consumer of information, if our data has integrated biases, the content will reflect these assumptions. So there is still space for us, thankfully, in developing this literacy and developing these skills. And lastly, privacy. Who owns this new content, intellectual property, and beyond the discussion about plagiarism and what it is, let's say that we use it to support the work we do. In the same way, some of us use Grammarly to correct our grammar. Grammarly is actually an AI product that we use and have integrated. So who owns this new generated content? Should we warn people that the tweets we make are AI generated or not? What are the norms around usage in the nonprofit sector? These are all still open questions that we'll have to find a way to work together and develop routines around this. So moving forward, and in conclusion, we need to also think about research, doing much more research. I'm not an AI specialist. I am a geek that loves the space, but if for me, I'm having difficulty catching up with what's happening. I can't imagine someone who's adding, and working on life emergencies having to catch up. So there's more research and more support needed, whether it's from funders interested in building capacity around the sector, and as well us as educator, our role into bringing these kinds of conversation with the audience, with you all, and our role in promoting and warning of some of the downfalls and the problematic uses of these technology. And finally, your role. It's easy to just sit and wait for this to come, but I would hope that people are active, trying to understand how could this be leveraged, because if you don't start the race is really starting. And there will be a before AI, which is the equivalent of us the first time we went on the internet, and an after, and we're living that moment. So I really urge people and practitioners to pay attention. So thank you. And I will ask my colleague, Narinder Dhami, to continue the conversation.
Okay, great. And I actually am going to share my screen. Would you be able to unshare your screen? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So I will get this on. Great. I think that's just such great content to kick off the discussion. I'm going to talk about some more practical applications. I know that there's many charities and nonprofits in the room, potentially even funders in the room, but I'll do that in the context of some of the work that I'm working on right now. So one of the organizations I lead is New Power Labs, and it's really looking about how capital flows in more equitable ways to underfunded and overlooked communities across Canada. And so just to give you a sense of, I think we all know this, there's large and growing inequalities in how capital flows across the country. Here are some data points. Here's a Carleton report in there as well, an unfunded report many folks know. But whether we're talking about impact investment capital or philanthropic capital, it's pretty much the same thing. We're not channeling capital to communities that are diverse across all of the beautiful diversity that exists across Canada, from gender to ethnicity to ability, sexual orientation, Indigenous identity, rural. There's just so much in there. But there's this lack of, I think the lack of, for lots of reasons, but partly the lack of trust, the lack of access, the lack of networks is creating a space in which we're not actually leveraging the talent of Canada. So I spent a good amount of time thinking about data, technology, its potential impacts, concerns. As a way of history, I'm also an electrical engineer. And so I've always tried to think through how technology can enable good, understanding that there are definitely caution in usage when we're thinking about how we deploy and implement technology. So the one thing I want to touch on here is this is how capital flows today, right? We have little bits of data, we don't really collect self-reported demographic data. But what you're seeing is in a lot of decision-making processes that either investors are doing, and you see this more in the public equity space, but you also see this in the private space, we're actually using tools to help us make decisions and models that enable us to make better decisions. But there is a lack of diversity in those data sets. So when you think about the future, what we're doing in some ways is reinforcing the biases if our decision making is going to leverage some of these AI tools. So as we think about how important it is on getting diversity in data sets, I start to think about what is a role of the social sector in supporting this work. So this is the work we do at New Power Labs. I'm going to pass through it quite quickly, but it's really about solving that. Like, how do we collect the data? How do we do it efficiently? How do we leverage the tools that are available to do it in a way that protects privacy, safety, and is user-centric? Now, as we think through that, we think also about a lot about kind of AI and the broader social sector. And then what does it mean if you're an operating charity? So, I use AI every day, and I think many of you actually do. You might just not know that you do. So think about if you are an operating organization, it's a charity, a foundation, a nonprofit. There are a number of ways AI can support you. Fundraising. So it can help you identify potential donors, personalized fundraising strategies. We just saw an example of creating a donor letter, and it's a draft donor letter. And then you go in and you can refine it, personalize it, and make it kind of that final product that links into the work that you do with your tone, your approach. Though AI can also do that. So if you get good at prompts on ChatGPT, it can actually help you and understand your tone and create content that's very relevant and very aligned with the way you would write. Donor stewardship, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity here to leverage AI in donor data, in providing insights into donor behavior. I think we're just getting started. You're seeing some of the bigger donor management softwares already leveraging AI. I think we're going to see a lot more of that. Program evaluation is another area. Now, this requires a lot of caution as we think about privacy, data security, what are we collecting, what is the bias that already exists across data. But the piece that I think we all can do if we don't do already is operations. Like this should be an instantaneous add to our day. How do we automate administrative tasks? How do we improve efficiencies from calendar management to drafting, supporting some social media work? If you want to, just a list of policies you should have at your organization, helping to get this administrative weight that we often have to do as organizations, but supporting the efficiency in executing that is huge. And that's one where, I think that's something that ChatGPT can help on. There's a lot of other software and tools available for us to think through how we can leverage AI in our day-to-day. And then the piece about cost, I put it both in opportunities and challenges, but one of the big opportunities is that some of these tools aren't that expensive. One of the AI tools I use to support kind of my calendar management, because I have multiple calendars that I have to do, costs about $100 a year. Think about the efficiency you get from a tool like that, the number of hours saved at that cost point. Canva, is a tool if you're a nonprofit, which is free, and they just released a whole new set of more AI integrated projects and programs as part of their work. ChatGPT you could use for free, but the list is endless. You want to make a logo today? It's actually much more cost efficient to leverage one of the AI tools that can make a logo. Do you want to create a new look and feel of your brand? There's AI tools out there which you could prompt in the right ways that will help design that. If you have a presentation coming up tomorrow or in the next 30 minutes, you can use AI to help build out those slides. There is so much opportunity here when we think about the state of which many charities and nonprofit organizations operate, under-resourced, stretched with time, usually trying to do many things in a small team. There's this huge opportunity for us to think about how AI can expedite and support us in that journey. Now, it's not without challenges, and some of these challenges have already been mentioned, data privacy and security. There's this really interesting story that's unfortunate in Pittsburgh, where they created an AI algorithm as part of their child protective services. And what they found was happening was the AI tool was increasing racial disparities because it was magnifying some of the racial bias that already existed within the system. So we need to be very careful in the ways in which we approach it and understanding what bias already exists within the systems and within the existing data that we give it. Cost, again, could also be a challenge because depending on what you're doing, there could be larger cost implications. And I think a big one here is skills and knowledge. From my experience, there's often a lot of fear to go into the space of leveraging technology. I think sometimes we also have a lot of restrictions on how funding needs to be used if you're an operating charity or a nonprofit. What I would say is that there's a Center for Digital Nonprofit Resilience. We support them at the Sonor Foundation. There's other groups across Canada that are there to support charities along their journey of embedding technology in their work. And there are a lot of, I would say, eager either volunteers or consultants, or think about some of the new board members you can add. There is that talent out there if you start to think about the diversity that exists across your community and start bringing in some of that talent, either through new staff roles, kind of re-envisioning what your staffing structure looks like, thinking about who is kind of within your network, and really thinking through how you bring some of that deep knowledge in technology and AI that is quite widespread across Canada. And then we think about the broader opportunities for the social sector, you know, we need to think through, I think, you know, what is the role of the social sector at a more ecosystem level within this space. So not only how do we increase awareness and education, how do we start to collaborate across AI experts, how do we develop ethical guidelines for our sector and maybe beyond our sector? How do we make it easy for us to understand data privacy and security? Addressing bias should be core to what we're trying to do as we're trying to drive social impact. What does that mean, not only internally to the work that we do, but externally to all the changes that are happening? Because we are a voice, hopefully, of moral focus and ethical focus in the broader sector, the broader ecosystem. And then ultimately, I think, you know, the opportunity is for us to build capacity. So we are not following, but leading in this, in the ways we utilize AI to solve for social issues that we're facing. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much, Narinder. As you've seen, I said, oh, we'll have half an hour, and then we get all passionate about what we talk. And so time goes, and so I take responsibility for that. But